Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Autodesk booth. We're going to take an in-depth look at Smoke 2013. If you haven't heard, Smoke has changed everything. You've seen it everywhere, right? Big on the windows. You think it was big enough on the windows when you're walking in? Nice. Okay, so what do we mean by that? Why are we saying Smoke's changed everything? If you're familiar with Smoke, Smoke's been an extremely powerful visual effect tool for the last decade or more, right? And about 3 years ago, we introduced Smoke on the Mac. And we took it, we gave it out, and we sold a bunch of them, but we didn't sell as many as we thought we would. And we got a lot of downloads, though. People were checking it out, but they just weren't gravitating to it. There was a couple things we figured out. Management said, let's figure this out. So they did a lot of research over the last 2 years. In fact, what they did was they took 20 people or so in LA, 20 people or so in Montreal. These are all editors who use Final Cut, Avid, and Premiere, experienced editors such as you. They put them in front of Smokes. They had cameras pointing down to see what their hands were doing. They had cameras watching everything. They said, go, edit, do what you got to do. Smoke's editorial workflow, which was fine for someone who knew it, was so different or unfamiliar to a typical editor that they said, this is one of the biggest problems. We need to change the way Smoke does basic editorial. Cutting, all the stuff you do every single day was just not as traditional as what you would expect. So they went back, redesigned the entire UI to be something much more familiar to you. We really believe that if you are familiar with those other applications, you can now open Smoke, and in 10 minutes, you'll be doing your editing. The other thing, though, is we didn't go and take away any of that power that Smoke already had. What made it such a good visual effect? So that's what we want to go through. We want to talk about some of that, too. The other thing we did, I don't know if you heard, but at $2:59 on Sunday, Smoke was $15,000. At 3 o'clock on Sunday, Smoke was $3,495. Great price drop to make these tools and this software accessible to so many more people. So we're going to walk through some of the stuff. You look at the UI, you can see what I have. I've got my source and my sequence view here, very traditional editorial workflow. I've got insert, override, and append, all your typical things you do every single day with your clips. I've got folders over here. It's funny, I was over there on the pod, and I have a Smoke user who's familiar with it, and I showed him that I have a right-click menu, and he almost freaked out. We've tried to make it very Mac-esque, what you are used to. I know you laugh about that, but Smoke 2012, it didn't have a hotkey like a right-click. Everything was done with hotkeys. You could achieve the same thing, but if you didn't know those hotkeys, it was very alien to you. So these are the things that we learned from our studies, and that's why we revamped this whole UI. So down here I have my track editor. I have unlimited video, unlimited audio. I have audio effects, all these video effects. All this stuff is right in the timeline. Over here I have my media source where I have bins. I can drag from the Finder, throw it in my project. It'll rebuild all the folder structures, import all the footage. But the other thing that's really important about bringing in your footage and managing your footage is what we call the Media Hub. The Media Hub is a modern-day media browser. So I'm just going to tab over there. So this is our Media Hub. And what it allows me to do is navigate, obviously, any single drive that's on these systems. In fact, if I want to mess up the guy over there doing 3ds Max demos, I can delete his files right now, but I'm not going to do that. What I can do, though, is start navigating and jumping to bookmarks or files that I need to work on. So this project, actually, I should have gave credit to Oakley, one of our clients and friends who are allowing us to use all their great work they did in Smoke, including their footage here for this NAB demonstration. These are all red files. So they shot everything on red, and what is great about this whole workflow, if I double-click on this, I get a window that appears. It shows me all the metadata. I can set my in and outs. I can prep all the work if I want before I even drag it in. More importantly is, if you come down here below here, I have format-specific options. Because I have a red file selected, I've got options such as my metadata. I also have options such as my color for color science as to how I want to treat this file when I bring it into Smoke. And of course, we have our deburring settings. So now you'll see that that clip is set to be a quarter right now. Now, if I don't want it to be a quarter, I can come down and switch it to half good. I can switch it to full. And you'll notice that the resolution is changing because that's how we're going to ingest this file. I'm going to bring it into Smoke at this new value. Why would you do that? Well, you don't want to go and bring every single 2K, 4K file into your editorial unless you need it. You need that extra information from that red file or the Erie file or any other file you're working with when you're doing color correction, when you're doing keying, when you want that extra bit depth information. That's what's so flexible about this. And what's even better is that in Smoke, when you're working, all of a sudden I've got a half-to-beard red file and I think I want full, I can change it on the fly. That's really powerful. We showed that a little earlier when we had our red demonstration. But if I come over here and take my clip, I just drag and drop it into my, automatically Smoke is bringing it now into my environment, okay? Keep in mind that when you do drag from the Finder, all these settings are taking place also for you. So once you set them up in the Medium Hub and you drag files, it's going to respect what you've already set up. So let's come back to my timeline, and I want to zoom in a little bit. We want to talk about some tools. If I click and hold a hotkey, you'll see that this file is a low-res file, okay? So what I want to do is go back out and take the high-res file. In fact, I already have it in here. Let me zoom back here. So here is my high-res file, and if I hold a hotkey, you can see that that's the full res. So I want to replace it in the timeline. Typical workflow. I want to set my in and outs. I want to go and do replace footage or whatever, or you can just come in here, and I take this and I drag it down into my timeline. So I start scrubbing through here. So I've got my red file in here. I want to do some editing. Typical, hit a hotkey. I do a cut. I pick this up. In Smoke, you want to throw something away, drag it to the bottom of the UI. You've discarded it. So now I've got my red file, my highest red file brought in here, and I want to process that out. What Smoke did, though, is because my timeline is not 2K, is adds a resize tool to that clip. So it scales it down to match what you're working with. But that doesn't mean you lost all that extra information the red file was offering you. It just brings it down to fit the format that you are working in. So I'm going to take this clip and drag it down and override the one that was there. So now in my timeline, I have my full red file, okay? Because I need to do color correction to this. I want those extra file, that extra data, because we want to alter this footage. So if I scrub through here, we've got a couple clips. So this clip looks pretty good. I'm happy with that. I go here. I don't like, it's flat. Not a lot of color. I want to do color correction to that. And what I'd actually like to do is take the color information from this clip and apply it to that other red file. So I'm going to switch over to another viewport I have. Right now, this is my source and my timeline. If I tap over here, I get to change what I'm looking at. I'll choose Triptych Player, which means I jump into a 3-view player, and I'll set some parameters quickly and say I want to look at the pre and post clip. These are totally flexible, totally independent. I can change the size of any of these. Each one is totally independent, which is great for a fact. If I go over here and I select this one, I say I want to see that frame. I click this one over here. I say, no, actually, I want to see this frame. And again, you can zoom in. I'm going to focus on this clip and this clip. So I'm going to make those a little larger. I want to add an effect to this. So how do we do that? I can come over and I can right-click and I can choose Add Effect, and I get my effect ribbon. These tools are your bread and butter, what you use every single day. Text tools, time warps, color correction, sparks. If you're using plugins, you can use those. Wipes, and an axis tool, which we'll look at in a second. I just want to add a color correction. So you'll notice here, all my tools are just being lined up for me. And if I want to access the subset parameters of them, I can just click on it, and now I've got color correction here. If I want to go and just blow this out with green, and I'm going to select this viewport, I'll go back, and just to show you this, I'm going to play this back. That's a red full bearing file playing back color correction right in my timeline that I just dragged and dropped in. Okay, that's not the color correction that I really want to do. I know you're all impressed with it, but that's not what I want. If I come over here, you'll see I have Edit Editor. I click that. We step into the full set of color correction tools you have available. Every tool you add in your timeline has a whole set of features that will not be exposed until you step into it. This color correction tool, it's an awesome color correction tool. It's the Autodesk color correction tool. It's got gamma, gain, offset, but I want to use another tool, and that over here, where it reads CC, I just click on that. I toggle into what's called the color warper. The strength of this tool, besides the fact that I can use my Avid board with my balls and manipulate things and adjust it, I have color selection. It's got great color matching tools in it too. So over here, I'm just going to come down and say, I want you to sample that sky. That's what I want you to apply that color correction to. Now I say I want you to take the sky from there, and it automatically just applies it. The problem is, though, it also color corrected his hat, it color corrected his skin, color corrected everything. That's not really what I want. So let's undo that really quickly. And now I want to go in here and use all this powerful selective stuff in here. So instead of working on the master, I'm going to tell Smoke, go to a selective. You'll notice my screen goes gray because it's asking me what is the color value you want to apply it to. I choose Pick Custom, and I just click and drag. We're now pulling a matte. We're isolating the sky so it receives the color correction. I can actually go and switch this to look at my matte, and we can see we have some issues. The bottom, I don't have all the sky. You can see because I didn't grab everything. And the shirt is obviously blue, and so is the sky. So this area is our diamond keyer, and I can go in there. There's two diamond shapes. One's the tolerance, one's the softness, and you can finesse that. But what I like is these tools right here. I have tolerance, I have minus softness, plus softness, and so on. So with the tolerance set, I can choose sample. I can just click and drag, and we can add the rest of the sky into the matte that's going to perform the color correction. For the shirt, I'm going to switch this to be softness, and then we're going to click our sampler, and I'm just going to click in here, and I'm going to drag until I start fine-tuning that. Probably could fine-tune it even a little bit more, but I'm just going to turn on my blur tool, and I'm going to blur that just a couple pixels like that, because I'm doing color correction here. That's too much. Let's go back to about 2 or 3. Ken, come on. Let's go back to about, that's good. Leave it. That's good enough, whatever. Okay, let's go back to our result now. So now when I go and I do the same thing I just did, I sample the sky, I tell it take the sky from there, boom. Now we've isolated the sky, we haven't affected the skin, we haven't affected the hat, and so on. So the skin tone itself is an issue because over here, he's got a nice tan. Over here, I don't know if it was winter or what in Australia, but he needs to have that fixed. So let's go back a little bit here, and let's zoom in on this guy because I want to be able to sample that color right there. So in this view, I go down to my color correction tool. I switch this to be number 2, selective number 2. And I go back and I choose the same thing. Pick color, and I just click and drag in the view to sample his skin tone. Now I want to look at the result of this so we can see it happen live. So now I've got my skin tone selected. I choose select. I region select the skin. I come over here. I region select the skin. It applies it. Ooh, it looks like he's got a sunburn there. I obviously sampled a little too much over there. But this is what's great is even if the color correction got me 90% there, I come in here. I can now just start dialing this down to get exactly what I want. So the color correction matching gets me to a certain point, or it works perfectly, but it's non-destructive. You can adjust and change any element of any time. Let's go back here to a 2-view layout. If my hotkey will work, I guess not. We're going to switch manually. Oh, I'm sorry. I got to get out of the color correction tool. Does anyone know how to use the software? Okay, let's go back to here. So what I wanted to focus on now is this next clip. I want to take the color correction that we applied to the previous clip and apply it to that. So it's as simple as taking it, pick it up, drag and drop it. I could right-click, choose copy, and paste. You'll see that the skin adjusted, but the sky didn't. The reason why it didn't is because the sample that we chose on the one sky is very different than the second sky. But because it's all non-destructive, because you have full control of everything, I can go back into this editor. I can return to selection number 1, which is the sky, and just come in here and pick the sky. Now the color correction is added for me. So that's great. Now, we can obviously copy and paste and copy effects like we just saw. But what if I want to add effects across a whole bunch of clips in my timeline? We have what is called a gap effect. So right now I've got these 3 clips right here, and I want to create a dark vignette effect of some kind. So I can go and just select all 3 of these, and I'll navigate to a top layer. I did that because that's where I want to put my color correction. I want to put effects that will affect all the video underneath it. So to do that, I just hit a hotkey. I set my in and outs now for my effect. I go back over to my ribbon. I could right-click to get it or not. I choose color correction. So now there's this color correction tool that's been applied just in that designated area. If we come in here and start to drag this down and kind of just finesse this to make it really dark, this is what I want, but now I want to put a mask on it to isolate the vignette effect. So you can keep adding more effects into your gap area. So I'll add an axis, which is not what I wanted to do, so let me undo that. I want to go and add what's called a wipe. Now let me go and just bring this over so we can see this. So the wipe, the default is this. It's going to wipe from one layer onto the other. But understand all it is a mask that's been pre-made for you. In fact, I love showing it because I have fun with it. I'm going to go into all of our presets that we have, and you'll see all the different wipes that are available. I know once you see this, you're going to buy smoke just because there's a heart, right? Everyone's going to use this. So we've got our heart now that's been animated. The key part is just the mask, okay? So if we step into the editor, you can see I can come in here, I can manipulate, change that, or affect it any way I want. Or better yet, I can delete that. And I can create my own mask that I want. So let's go back to the first frame. I'll zoom back. In fact, watch this. I hold a hotkey. I can actually draw my mask for me and then close it out instead of making all the control points myself. So this is good. Maybe we want to finesse this a little bit more like so. But let's go and invert that. And then what I want to do is create a soft effect to this. So, of course, every masking tool should have feathering inside and out or whatever. But I want to go further with that. I'll switch my softness to be what's called advanced gradients. This now gives me independent control of the fall off for the inside and the outside of the mask. So I can do things like switch my tool to a scale tool, and I can region select this, and I can then go in here and scale these up to be like that. I can take this, drag this out. You get the idea. Lots of flexibility. So now I exit back to the timeline, and you'll see now that is affecting everything. Let me go down to my color correct. I could process that out. I was going to render that out, but we'll just move on. So now the benefit of that is this gap effect, it's still considered a layer. It's like a video clip. I can edit it, I can drag it, I can change it, and it's non-destructive. I can change any part of it at any time that I want. Now, when we're working on these demos up in Montreal with all the guys that are here, we were trying to think about how to discuss the story about why you would like smoke. And this is a perfect example. How many people have had clients that you're sitting working with them, and they say things to you that you're baffled? The guy says, can you make it 10% more happy? Can you give talent can you give a little more room to the talent? I don't know, I don't like it, just fix it, right? So what your workflow is, and this is not an insult, a typical workflow now is you're in Final Cut, Avid, or Premiere, and you got to go to this application, to that application, to that application. You will deliver the content that your client wants, but you're round-tripping all over the place to get the end result done. Our focus here is being able to do all of this in my timeline inside of Smoke. So I've got this clip here, and let's say the client says, I just need it to be more dynamic. Can you put some text floating in the background? Can you give me 3D text? Can you do this? Sure, I can. Let me go into Smoke here. I'm going to first make a copy of this. So I'm going to go back to where I was. Bear with me. Go back to the clip that I want, and I want to duplicate that. So I want to have multiple layers of the same footage. So I hold a hotkey, I pick it up, and you can see Smoke's telling me where it's going to drop it. I'll say put it right there. So now we've got the same clip, and I purposely put a gap in between because we want to put text in there. But now I need to go and isolate my golfer and the trees. I want the sky gone. So we can use a Luma key to do that. So I select my tool, my clip, and I go over to my tools, and I'm going to add an axis effect. Understand that the axis effect, of course, has an axis. So it allows me to come in here and rotate my clip. It allows me to go and change the positioning and all that. But there's so much more in the tool. It's like a super tool. When I step into the editor for this, you'll notice now I've got keying, tracking, color correction. All these tools are built in this. More importantly is you need to understand this is no longer a flat image. I am still in my timeline, remember that, but I can switch this to be an extended bicubic, and I can say subdivide this a couple times. Now I can select this, and I can start selecting my vertices, and I can just start to model and manipulate my footage. It is true 3D once you bring it into the axis. Okay, that's a little more than I really need to do here, but I just like the eye candy of it to show it's available. Let me go and undo that. So what I want to do is key this, right? So let's go over to our keyer right here. I click the keyer button. We step into the keyer. I've got 7 different, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 different keyers available to me inside of Smoke. I'm just pulling a Luma key on this one. The next shot we're going to work on, we're going to look at Chroma Keying. So my Luma key is set. I'll go and look at the mat of this, and we're just going to start crunching this down with my histogram over here, something like that, maybe even a little bit more, and I want to invert it. So even though I'm pulling my Luma key, there's still other elements in the scene that I want to make sure are gone. So we're going to use masks to do that. Let's go back to look at the front, and I'm going to come along and just add a mask. Again, another tool, it's just there for me. I come in here and I choose my add, and I'm just going to draw my mask very quickly around the green here. I want to make sure that this is totally opaque, and the Luma key wasn't doing enough for me. So if I scrub through, we can see what's happening. We have a camera movement, so we're going to need to animate our mask. So I could obviously keyframe this manually myself, but why would I do that? Smoke has such a powerful tracking tool. I'm going to step into the tracker, and I'm going to take a couple tracker markers to start positioning where I want them to be. The first tracker marker is going to analyze my X and Y. The second one is going to analyze any scaling that took place, and then it's going to apply it to my mask. So if I return back out here, I now have my mask animated perfectly for me. That was too easy. Let's say we need to isolate his legs, okay? This is going to be a little more complicated because you can see we've got his bending his leg, he's moving around. But let's add a mask, and let's go through here. And the reason why I'm going to do this, and I'm not even going to worry about adding too many control points, because typically you don't want to have a lot of control points because roto work is a pain when you have all these extra control points. But I'm just going to come along such as this, close that off. Instead of animating that as an object, I'll go into the tracker, and now I have a tracker box for every single control point of my mask. So all we need to do now is tell it, I want you to gain those, which I'm going to analyze them all at once, and that's taking a whopping 10 seconds to go frame by frame by frame and animate that mask for me, instead of me having to fine-tune and do this every single frame with auto key on. Once it's done, I return back out, and you can see I would obviously finesse that a little bit more if I was doing production, but my mask has been animated for me. You can obviously change and edit it if you needed to. For demonstration purposes, we're going to move on. So let's go back to our timeline. So remember, that was the top layer, and if I turn off my bottom layer, you can see what we did. We've isolated him. So now we can put text behind it, and it'll appear as if it's actually in the scene. So we're going to do the same thing I did before. I'm going to create a gap effect right in between those two layers. So I hit a hotkey, I go to my tools, I add a text tool. Now we're going to step right into the text tool really quick. I'm going to click in the screen, and I'm just going to add the word Oakley. And now we can come over here and start selecting our fonts. And I can spend an hour, if you wanted to, demonstrating the text tools. You can animate each text tool in you can animate each letter individually if you wanted to. You can put it on a path. There's all sorts of presets to what your text can do, outlines, all shadows, great stuff. But in this case, this is all I need. I go back to the timeline, and I navigate up to the top layer. I now think I'm creating a pretty cool effect. But here's where I'm going to run into a wall. Layer-based editing stops or hinders you from really interacting the different elements together. To really take this further, I need to be in a 3D environment. This is where Smoke's new Connectfx workflow opens up a whole nother world for you. I'll select these clips. I go over to my tools, and I choose Connectfx. We step into a node-based, did I not click on it? There we go. We step into a node-based environment. So this is a connect the dots, if you will, type of workflow. Let me just quickly set up some parameters. So I've got my view over here, and what Smoke did was it created an action node. Action is our 3D compositor. Because I had multiple layers selected in my timeline, it purposely created this tool and took the bottom layer and put that as my background. It put the text layer above it, and then it put the one with the key and the tracking all on it. So if I double click on this and we look down here, there's my background, there's my text, and there is my layer with the key and the track all applied. Think of it as just stacking it up, but the difference is we're in true 3D space. I want to return and just talk a little bit more about Connectfx and why this is so powerful. Why does it offer you such flexibility? If I go over to my tool bin for Connectfx, here's every single tool I have available to me at my fingertips to create the effect that I want. And if I want to, I can go in here and choose something like a stylized tool. I drag this in, I just drop it. It now is added into my pipe, and you see the end result taking place. This is a great tool. Double click on any tool inside Connectfx. The bottom of your UI will change to give you the parameters available to it. I'll come in here and I've got all these presets. Maybe I want an impressionist look or whatever. So there's a new style. Customize, change all of this. But here's the flexibility of node-based environment. I don't want this to be affecting everything. I want to just pick this thing up, and I want it to just affect my backplate. So now if I select action, I've created a totally different effect just by moving that node around. That's really the power of being in a node-based environment. We don't want that, do we? Let's get rid of that. Let's go in here. Now let's talk about 3D. So action is a 3D environment. If I switch my view to be that hotkey's not working, we'll fix that later. So remember, I am an alpha. The software is alpha. So if I do crash, please understand that. But let's go and rotate this. So the real point of this is I want you to see that there's a camera. So when you go into action, you have a camera, you have lights, you are in true 3D space. I can bend these layers like I did earlier if I wanted to, but what I do is I want to create parallax. I want to put elements in between the text, the background, and my front layer. So we're going to go into the schematic for a second, and I'm going to double click on my axis for my layer, and I'm going to return back to this view because I want you to see it. As I start to move this in Z space, we're moving it closer to the camera. So it's getting larger because it's obviously moving closer to the camera. That's not what I want. I just want to move it closer to the camera but stay in frame. So Smoke offers you great options such as scale this on position when I drag and move it. So notice what's happening. Now I'm moving it in Z space, but it's automatically scaling it so my camera view never changes the size. This will give me the ability to create parallax camera movements, place things behind it, and so on. In fact, let's go back to our schematic view. We'll take our text. If we scrub through this, you can see the trees are moving. I want the text to move with the trees. So with this selected, understand again, every layer in action has an axis tool that's applied to it automatically. You can animate that independently. But we're going to go once again into our tracker and do the same thing. But I want to use the trees as my reference point because that has a different parallax than the ground. So if I click Analyze, smoke goes through, same process. It's going to do X and Y and scale. And when we return back, you can see now the text has been moved off to the side. That's fine, though. This is what's great about a node-based environment. I come over here, I'll take another axis, I'll feed it in there. So now I have multiple control over the positioning and so on of my text. The first one is going to control the tracking data. The second one is going to control the positioning of it here. So now as we scrub through, we've got the Oakley word moving with the trees. This is where I realize I'm being kind of silly because this is actually a flat 2D object. In action, I have true 3D text. I can create 3D text, so that will allow this to be even more dynamic. So let's go back to our node bin. I'll take my 3D text and I'll add it in. So I double click on it, I get my parameters. Let's just quickly re-enter everything like we did before. Oakley, the font size was about 250 if I remember correctly. I'll remember it by Friday. Let's go in here, add my bold font. So now I've got the same font. I'm going to go to the top view because I really want you to see this. So there's my camera. There's my layer way close to the camera. That's my 3D text. Watch as I start to add depth. So it is true 3D text. I can model this out. I'll turn on an option called shading so we can see this in the viewport a little better. And now as I start to rotate this text, it is true 3D text. You can take it further. This little window here, this allows me to start bending and modeling and giving bevel edges to my text. I can customize every element of it. We can also go and attach that tracker marker, which I want to do, that we use for our 2D text. Let's just tell it to drive or be the parent of this 3D text. Then I can select my 3D text, and I can position it exactly where I want it to be. And then I'm going to take this flat 2D text and throw it away. Okay, so now we've got it's working. Let's take the text and move it back behind him. So this is looking good. I'm starting to really like it. I want to change what's on the text. I obviously could color it, change its color. If we go to its parameters right here, I go to color, we can make it pink, we can animate whatever. But what's powerful is that in Smoke, we can put diffuse maps, reflection maps, distortion maps, all on our different geometries such as this. So I want to go out to my desktop once again, and I want to get this golf ball image that I have. So it comes in as a layer. I bring it in that way. And if I wanted it as a layer, I can obviously come in here, manipulate this. But I don't want it as a layer. I just wanted to bring that image in. So again, I'm going to throw it away. There it is inside my media bin. I just want to have access to it. So I'll turn off the matte for that. So with that selected, and I select this geometry, if we zoom in so we can see it happen live, I'll go to my node bin. I'll hit a hotkey. I have a diffuse map. So now, boom, I now apply that texture onto my 3D geometry. If we go over here and zoom back a little bit so you see it better, I double-click on my actual image. I've got all sorts of controls as to how we're going to use that mapped object on our geometry. I switched it to tile repeat so that no matter what size I scale it to, it's always going to have a mirrored effect, and it's an infinitive map, if you will, now that's applied to my text. So this is looking really good. I want to add some lights in here. I want to change the whole look of this thing by bringing in some lights. So we'll go to our top view just so you can see it happen live because I like showing the interactivity with the lights inside of Smoke. I'll take my light, I drag it in. You can see just how interactive this is. So I'm going to position this light to be the main light for my entire scene. So I can take it in either viewport and move it up here. I can drag it back closer to the camera. Okay, that's good. Let's get one more light, and I'll take this one, and I'm going to put it behind the text, okay? And then I'll drag it up over here by the A. The reason why I want that is I want to create a lens flare shooting toward the camera. So I just double-click on my lens flare, and now I have a true 3D volumetric lens flare. More importantly, watch this. It respects all the 3D geometry. It respects the alpha information of my layers. So I can take and create extreme awesome effects right here. If I go to my schematic view, I want you just to see this is what was just created. Every element of that lens flare is procedural. I can take my logo and attach it so that's what's shooting out, that's coming toward the camera. But if I select this iris over here and I start to scale this up, you can see I can adjust that. I can adjust the color. It's unbelievable the amount of control you have over these. So I'm happy with this. I'm going to do a quick animation. So I'll get it so it's just peeking out from the A. Auto key. I'll put auto key on. I'll get my light. Let me undo that. And then we're going to go to the last frame. And I'm just going to animate this to move across. And there's a little bug that's going to be reported that the text gets messed up a little bit. So we're going to drag that back behind him again. And now I'm happy with this, okay? So I want to go back to my timeline. Remember, I was in my timeline, so I had access to all of this, and I go back to the timeline. My client comes over, looks at this, and says, yeah, I like it, but I want to change, okay? Now, if you're working in your typical round-tripping environment, what are you going to do? You're going to leave your editor. You're going to go back to 3 more applications. You're going to re-render all the files, make the adjustments, and then hope the client likes it. Well, here in Smoke, I just go, you know what? I'm going to make a copy of that. And now I'm going to go to this new copy, and I'm going to step back into this editor. And I'm just going to make some changes. I should also point out, I want to go to my timing view. Inside Connectfx, because I had multiple layers selected, I still have full access to that. I have all the audio effects. Just because I took it into here, I don't lose that capability. But what I'm going to do is tell this light that we have to turn off. So now I've created an entire different look. We go back into our timeline. I now have both of these. And let's watch this. I'm going to hit process. That is going to take 20, less than 12, whoa, going fast, 10 seconds, and I've rendered that. I've processed volumetric lighting, 3D compositing, cameras, all the tracking, all that information is now done in my timeline, and I'm back to being live. This is what we're stressing about having everything in one environment. Having that node-based compositing environment in your editor offers you so much more flexibility and control over your work that you're working on. Okay, is everyone impressed yet? I hope so. Let's go and take a look at another composite that we want to work on. And there's a couple funny stories on this one here. I'm just going to navigate over here. I'm going to open up this composite. So I've got another shot here. Now, what we have is a couple different green screens. Let me bring this up, and I'll tell you first the story. I'll scrub through here. So this is, we wanted to make a Smoke promo piece, okay? We're so excited about new Smoke 2013. So this first shot's already done. The world's going to shake because of what we're going to show, okay? I'm being really silly. Bear with me. Then we go over here, and I want this woman to be in this background. First of all, that background was never intended for her to be there. It was never shot for her to be in there. It's just a background we happen to have, so we're going to use it. And we shot green screen. We're going to have this woman, and she's going to poke the Smoke logo, okay? So we show this to our boss, and he says, you're not showing that as a keying demo. That key is going to be a one-button click. Go back, reshoot it, mess up the key. I want you to show a key that people deal with every single day. So we went back and we shot what typically happens. Now, maybe they thought it was a good thing to take it out of focus. I don't know. Maybe that would help me. I could do it in the computer, but no, you do it. That's a good idea. And you can see we've added the wind blowing, and of course, we want to have her walking in front of the light. Nice. Okay. So we're going to take these elements, and how are we going to do this? We're going to use the Chroma key. I looked at the Luma key a minute ago, so let's take this clip in my timeline, and I'm going to go back to my tools, and I'll add an axis effect. Remember when I told you the axis is a super tool. We're going to go right into the axis effect, and I'm going to go into my keying tools. So as I mentioned, we have 8 different keyers. We've got the master keyer. We've got the RGB, YUV, HLS channel, blah, blah, blah. Lots of control. No matter what you need keyed, you've got the tools in front of you. So I'm going to scrub over here to a frame when she's in focus because that would make a little more sense, such as this. And now we'll start pulling our key. So I just come in here and I click and drag across the screen. We start pulling the key. It looks good, but let's look at the mat. So you can see, yeah, we still have some major issues. We know we've got this light up here. This is going to be something we're going to have to roto out. No key is going to pull that out. But we do all these other corruption issues in her skin tone, in her shadow area. This is why I love the master keyer. If I hold a hotkey, Smoke is going to give me parameters. It's going to suggest that I adjust to fix the key. They are the same parameters that are available down here, but it's going to give it in context of what I'm adjusting and fixing. The other thing that I love about this is what's called patches. If I needed to really finesse this, I can add keyers on top of keyers, or if I just crunch the Luma on this thing, I can kill all the soft hair, but I don't want to do that. I'm working on my mat, but if I switch this to be what's called a patch, and I come in the view, and I click and drag, I'm introducing correction to the key based on just that area that I selected. So notice that it switched to black. That's because I was trying to get rid of transparency. So if I look over here, I see her arm is popping in a little bit. So let's go and switch to another patch, and I'll region select and select that. It realizes I'm trying to introduce those pixels back, and it makes the adjustment for me. So now, if you look at the hair, how nice we're holding this, okay? But of course, she's going to step into the light. I would finesse this a little more, but let's focus on creating some masks. So in context, I want to see where is the point she goes over to the side the most, somewhere around there. So let's go to a masking tool. I'll choose Add, and we're just going to click and drag and create our mask just like this. Pretty straightforward stuff. And again, I'm going to set this to be black. Now I'm going to look, where does she go all the way to the side on the right-hand side? Okay, we'll go in the first frame. That will work. Let's create a mask for this over here. And then we're going to focus on that mask that's going to get rid of that light. So this is going to be a little trickier, right? Because all that hair, we don't want to lose that. So if I go in here and add a mask, I'm going to literally draw my mask right around the edge of her head. I'm not going to worry about losing the hair yet, because we have those advanced gradients that I showed you a minute ago, which will allow me to animate and control that. First of all, let's just get some of the animation done automatically. I got my mask selected. I'm going to go into the tracker like we did before. Even though that thing is totally blurred out, Smoke is going to do an amazing job tracking that eye and moving the animation of the mask for me. Okay, that's done. Let's go back so you can see it's animated the mask. Of course, you know I have that softness, right? Well, that's not going to cut it for me. I need more control of that. So if we zoom in a little bit, and I go to Edge Gradients, this is what I need. Now I can control the fall off of the mask where her hair is and tighten it where I don't want to have more transparency. And I would probably come through here and just jump frame to frame, a couple frames, go about 10 frames over, and I'll animate this such as this. Maybe I want to tighten this, pull back so we don't get as much light, move forward some more frames. I'm going to, again, just manipulate my mask where I need it to be. But having that ability to animate this just opens up so much control and flexibility of my masking tool. So let's just fine tune that. And we'll go back to the last frame. So here I'm probably going to just one more adjustment there. And then we can pull this in, but then open up my feathering so I hold her here. So now if we take a look at the end result, we can see we've got a pretty decent job. I would obviously probably finesse that a little bit more, but for demo purposes, we're going to continue on because there's some other issues we need to resolve. I want to first talk about the color suppression tools. The color suppression tool is on by default. So if I come down here and turn it off, and I zoom in, you can see all that green spill that's happening, okay? It's awesome this is on. When I pick my green, it automatically turns it on and suppresses all of it that easily. More importantly, I find, is this trackball right here. I can shift the color that's being suppressed to anything else that I want. So if she's standing in front of a red brick wall in my comp, I can shift it to match the color of the wall that's behind her. That's really powerful. Okay. The next issue we have is this edge around here. You can see how we got this line right along the edge there. So I've got my Luma controls. I can start dragging this, but what I don't like is I don't like having to look down at my parameter while I look at it in the view too. So we can switch this to be the blend tool. Now when I come in the view, look what I get. I get that same parameter, but it's in context of what I'm looking at. That's why I really like this color correction tool. Being able to really focus on the pixels, not the buttons at the bottom of my screen. The last thing I would probably want to do is give some color correction to her. So we step into the color correction tool. I'll just use the Autodesk color correction tool to finesse this. We return back out. Let's go back to our timeline. And you can see now we've got a pretty good job. Let's process that. That's taken 20 seconds or so to render that out, and then I'm back live real time. Keep in mind that is a 2K plate. That is the 2K red file that I was working on. That's why we were able to hold all that detail, but it took less than 20 seconds to process, render everything, and I'm back live on my timeline. So the next shot we're going to talk about is this. So that looks good, right? Huh? Not bad. Look at the hair. Beautiful. Okay, let's go over here. We want to do a key on her, and trust me, it's a lot easier. Let's go and do the same thing, though. I'll add an axis effect. We'll step in. If I for demonstration purposes, if I go to my keying tool and I click and drag, you can see that's a lot easier, right? Okay, well, I already have a loaded setup. I don't want to spend too much time redoing what I just showed you. So we go back out to the timeline. So here's where, again, we're going to run into a wall as to what I can do in a layer-based timeline. I need to take this woman and put her into a backplate that she was never in, obviously. I want shadows. I want lights. This is where, again, Connectfx opens up so many opportunities for me. So we're going to go here and select both of my backplate and this. I go back over to my tools, and I'll choose Connectfx. I'm missing. There we go. So again, it builds the action tool for me, and it puts her as the main layer, and it puts the backplate as my background. So I step into the node base for it. This is the axis, so if I double-click that, as you can see, we can manipulate her and everything. But first thing I want to do is actually let the tracker, let Smoke, position this where I need it to be in my scene. So I'm going to go to my first frame, and I'll step into the tracker with just one tracker marker. And I'm going to pick a tracker spot down here in the ground. Now, I'm going to do something you probably don't see in many demos. I'm going to make sure it doesn't do it right, because this is what you deal with every single day. I'm not going to have a track that works perfectly. I want to show you how to solve the problems. So we click Analyze. It's going to start going through. But what's going to happen, it starts losing it, as you can see. Well, that's okay. I'll stop it. Let's go back to where we find a good reference point, and now we have this button called Snap. I just click Snap, and then I click Analyze, and it's going to start reprocessing it where it found the good track. So I'm telling Smoke to change the reference point that it's using as it goes along. I didn't want you to fall off 3 times. That's okay. Go back over here to a good spot, click Snap again. You can also reposition the tracker marker if you had to. If something went off frame, I can reposition and it would continue the track for me automatically. So when we return back out here, go back to the first frame, you can see that she's been now tracked to follow the movement. But this is where we have this secondary axis that I can now come in here and I can start to reposition her where I want her to be. We can obviously come and add values to be exactly where I want it to be or so on. But that's close enough. Let's also scale her down a little bit. Take her down about 75%. See if that fits in the scene. So we move along, and that's good. It doesn't look very realistic. She's got no shadows falling on the ground. It doesn't look right. So I want to create a light that's going to cast a shadow so that she fits in the scene. The problem is she's floating in 3D space. That background is a flat image. I need to create something that will receive the shadow. This is where, again, the tools that we have available are awesome. So I go over to my tool bin. I hit a hotkey. I'm going to take a color frame. So all this is a white solid frame that I want into my action environment. So it's simple again. You select the tool. I'll come here and I'll tell Action, give me a new input. So now I have a new layer, if you will, and I'm just going to connect that, both on the back and the front. So we go back over to Action, and there it is. So here's my new plane that I have, and I want to go in, if I want to animate this, if I want to do it manually, that would be silly. Let's take that tracker that we used already, and I'm just going to feed it and attach it to that plane. So now that plane is going to move with the camera movement. Then I can come in here, and we want it to be -90 because we want it to be the floor plane. I enter that, and we'll come over and just make some adjustments to put it where I want it to be. And I might want to scale that a little bit to make sure it fits the whole frame. And then we'll go and take that and put it underneath her. So now I've got something where the shadows can fall on. Let's start adding our lights. So I come over to my scene here, and I'm going to go to my node bin. I'll take a light and drag it in here. This first light, I actually want to have, like I did with that golfer, as the main light for the entire scene. First thing we do is we attach our tracker because we want that light to move with that. And then with that light selected, I can start manipulating it or moving it wherever I want it to be. That's not the right button, Ken. Let me undo that. I want to take my light, and I want to move it back away from the scene like so. Really position it far away from the camera. Okay, so now we see we scrub through here. That's been animated. That's great. And so let's move it off to the side over here. Okay, now let's add the light that's going to be the actual shadow caster. So we go back to our node bin again. I take my light. Again, first thing I'm going to do is attach that tracker. I want to keep repurposing that data that I had. This light, we want to be behind her. So if I go to my top view, if you've ever worked in 3D animation programs, you know having a top view allows you to really notify and position where things are. So in this case, I want to go here and just position this back, move this in Z space. Bear with me, my light's over here before I grab the wrong thing. I want to just move this back far enough so that it's going to cast the light, and I can then position it in the Y where I want it to be and so on. Bring it up. So I'm going to position like where the lights would be coming from the window. Then we'll go and turn on our shadows. So this is my new light that I just created. I go to my node bin. Again, all the tools I have are right at my fingertips. I drag it in. I'm now casting my shadow onto the plane. Here's where, if I need to, I would go back to my plane and reposition this exactly where I want it to be so my shadow falls in just how as I want. All the control I have on my shadows, I can bring softness to them. I can color bleed. All these great tools you have. Now watch what happens. I select my light. We're creating a realistic shadow. Now we need to make that plane disappear, though, right? So every single you do, remember, double-click on something, you get the parameters for it. Down here, I've got flame blend modes. We call them flame and smoke blend modes. I know them, but maybe you don't. Maybe you're new to the software and you're much more familiar with Photoshop. So I switch it to Photoshop, and now I got every single Photoshop blend mode. I'm comfortable with these. I'll choose multiply. I now have a multiply effect of my plane falling on there. The next thing, though, I don't like the edge of the plane. I'm going to soften that a little bit. So when we go to our media bin, there's all my media. Every single tool in here can be applied, keying, color correcting, blends, and so on. I'm going to come here and pick up my pen when I drop it and go and add a softness to this. And now you'll really notice what's happening by looking at this because it's transparent over here. But as I start to drag this, you're seeing what I'm doing. I'm creating a fall off of the white plane as it enters the scene. This is going to allow me to really let that fall into the scene and a nicer look to it. So this is looking good. We're really happy with this part. Like I said, though, I want her to have the smoke logo in the scene, and she's going to touch it. I don't want a flat logo. I want a 3D object. So this is, again, the power. I'm in a 3D environment called action in smoke. We have 3D applications, 3ds Max, Maya, Softimage. You can import 3ds Max files. I can import FBX files. I'll just double-click on the import button. All these are the default geometry that ships with smoke. So if you need a sphere, you need a pyramid, you need a plate, they're all available to you. I'm going to go to where I have my smoke logo waiting for me, and I'm going to load it into my scene. So now I bring in the actual geometry that is the smoke logo. If we go to the top view, you can see there it is. Back in my schematic view, you'll see what it gave me. It gave me the geometry, it gave me the axis, and a material. Had there been a material mapped on this inside of 3ds Max, Maya, or Softimage, that would have came over too. In this case, I want to first of all attach my tracker data. We want to make sure it's following the camera movement. And then I can go to this axis, and I'm just going to take it and move it over to where I want it to be in my scene. You can move it in the viewport, or I can do it over here. So just drag it up like that, line up. Okay, now I look at my shadows. I want to soften those a little more. This is what's great. Go back. Now let's start softening my shadow a little more. And I can also go back to my geometry, and I can rotate to create a really cool effect. Okay, now I want to create a reflection on this. I want to have a really nice light effect to my geometry. But to do that, I want to create a paint stroke or a paint effect. I don't need to go to some other program to do that. I'm over here in my view. I'm going to go right back over to Connectfx. I go in here. I have a full paint program right inside of Smoke. Double-click on it, and here's my layer-based composite, my layer-based paint. If I want to do cloning, smearing, blurring, all the different tools you have available to you. And like I said, all I'm going to do is create a larger brush as this, and I'm just going to click and create something like that, okay? That's what I want to use as my reflection. So back over in action, I'm going to tell it I need you to add another output. So we come here and say, give me a new input. I take this, and I go and connect that. Now it's brought in as a layer. I don't want that. Let me switch over to this view. You can see there it is. I'm just going to take this and throw it away. All I was trying to do was actually bring in that paint object that I created because I wanted to have access to it as a material. With my material node selected for the geometry and my material I just created, I can go to my node bin and I have a reflection map. Now I add my reflection map. Now if I rotate my geometry, you can see just how cool that is. I've created a really cool effect to that, okay? So let's go and soften it a little bit. Again, just double click on your node or whatever it is. I go over here and I can now come in here and soften this a little bit. I can control the effect if I want and so on. This looks pretty good. I'm happy with that. Next problem I have, as I scrub through here, I realize she's supposed to be hitting that a little earlier. She's supposed to be poking it, if you will, a little earlier. I don't like that. So this is what's great. I showed you earlier the timing view is available to me. There's my edit that I had way back on my timeline. I still have full access to this. So if I go to the frame where I want her actually tipping it, I can select that clip, and I can just start repositioning the timing. I can alter the edit right here inside of Action, inside of the Connectfx environment. Okay, so now my timing's where I want it to be. Let's go back to the first frame, because what I want to do is have lights coming through the window. I have the light. I want rays coming through the window, right? So here's my light right there. Let's position it so it's a little more dynamic when I do this. So with this light selected, I go to my node bin. I'll take my raise tool and add it in here. Immediately you see it's like a flashlight that's shooting in the scene. But if I go to my raise tool, I'll double click on this, I can now take this spread and just start blowing this out. So now I can create a really cool dynamic effect of the lights that are supposedly coming through those windows, and that's awesome. Let's go and do this now. I want to create an effect that's only going to affect the geometry of this, right? But I'm going to do it outside of Action. If I go to my schematic, here's all my connected dots. Here's all my paint. Again, access to everything. I want to put a tool after it. If I go over to my node bin, and I get a glow tool like this, and I drag and drop it, it's going to affect everything. And that's not what I want. So this is what the power of this node-based environment. If I go back to action, I'm going to come down to the output of action. If I go back to action, go to the output, I'll make a copy of my output, and I'm going to switch this to just give me my matte. Notice what I can do. I can do ambient occlusion pass. I can do shadow pass, Z-depth pass. All that can be rendered out of action also. But in this case, all I want to do is create a matte of just the logo. So we can see that we have the woman and the ground plane that are part of my matte right now. I'm going to come over here and switch my tool to be edit output. I'm just going to say, I don't want that, and I don't want that. So now we create a matte just of the logo. Let's go back to our move tool, and let's go back to our schematic. So again, it's going to be more dynamic if you can watch it live. So here's the going. My glow is here. Let's select the glow. You can see it's affecting everything. Let's take that output of the matte and feed it into the glow, and boom. Now the glow is only affecting the object. This is really the flexibility and the power of a node-based environment. So let's go back out to the timeline, Connectfx, step out, get into my timeline. Again, you want to do versioning, you want to change something, it's very easy. It's right there. Make copies of this. Go and process it. Drag it up here. Go in and maybe we say we don't want to have the rays happening. I want to do a lens flare. Again, exit out. Go back into it. Go into my action environment. Say, okay, I don't want the rays. Throw that away. Select my light. Go back to the node bin. I take my lens flare and drag it in. Boom, we got our lens flare, a new version that's been added. Then I go right back to the timeline. Think of how much round tripping you go through every single day. It's not an insult. When I was talking to people there, I'm like, this workflow has been what we've all lived with because there's not been an alternative. You need to leave your editor to go do 5 different things to bring them back into your editor. This is not a criticism. It is the fact, it is the reality of what has been offered to you until now. So by taking Smoke, first of all, revamping the whole editorial UI to make you comfortable the minute you step into the editorial environment, that's a great thing. Then to add Connectfx, a node-based environment with such amazing power. And then the biggest thing is taking a software that was $15,000 3 days ago and offering it for $3,495. This is an alpha version of the software we are working on. It will be shipping in early fall, but we want feedback. We want people to really test this. So starting in June, we are offering Smoke for free until we ship it to anyone who wants it. You can sign up. There's a card at the info booth. You can go there, register. We'll let you download it. We're going to have forums where we want your feedback. Tell us what you think. We want to hear from you. Everything that we've gotten from this point, we've built it by listening to editors, listening to people who use this software. Now we're opening it up to everybody to say, tell us what you think, experiment with this, really dig into the software, and check it out. So this is Smoke 2013. I hope you've enjoyed the presentation. Remember, pods over there, pods over there. We're at AJA, we're at B&H, we're at Promise. We're all over the place because we are so excited about this release. Thank you all. Enjoy the rest of the show.